I know that many of you may recognize the name Rosa Parks, but listen carefully as there are many important key details that you may not know about this amazing woman. Rosa Parks, the mother of the Civil Rights Movement. Rosa Louise Parks was born a long time ago in 1913 in Tuskegee, Alabama. Her family name was McCulley. Rose and her family were African American. Rosa grew up on a small farm with her brother, mother, and grandparents. Rosa was a happy child. She loved her family. However, Rosa lived at a time and in a place where African Americans faced discrimination. What does discrimination mean? It means to be treated unfairly based on your skin color, your race, or your religion. This was especially true in the South, where Rosa lived, because in that part of the United States there was segregation. Segregation is the practice of keeping groups of different people separate from others. Because of segregation, African Americans and white people did not go to the same schools, eat at the same restaurants, or go to the same movie theaters. When traveling by bus, African Americans were expected to sit in certain seats. It was as if African Americans and white people lived in different worlds. An example of segregation in the South. When Rosa was a little girl, she attended a school that was just for African American children. It was an old one-room schoolhouse that only held classes for 5 months of each year. Far too often, there weren't enough desks or school supplies for the students. Rosa noticed that buses took white children to the new school near where she lived. When Rosa was 11 years old, she was sent to Montgomery, Alabama to continue her studies. But when she was 16, Rosa had to leave school to care for her grandmother and her mother, who had both become ill. To help support her family, Rosa worked in a shirt factory. NAACP activists, including Thurgood Marshall. When Rosa was 19, she married Raymond Parks. Raymond was a barber. He was also actively involved in the Montgomery chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, also called NAACP. The word chapter that I just said means in an area, it's a certain group that makes up one small section of a larger group. The word chapter can also mean one of the main sections of a book. This image shows another chapter of the NAACP from another state. This organization wanted to make life in the United States fairer and safer for all African Americans and end segregation in the South. Rosa also became involved and served as the Montgomery chapter secretary. In addition, she returned to high school to earn her high school diploma. Then came the day in Rosa's life when she stood up for what was right. Actually, Rosa did not stand up, and that's the reason why we remember and honor Rosa Parks to this day. Rosa Boarding the Bus. The evening of December 1st, 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama, was cold. The streets were full of people shopping or making their way from home from work. By this time, Rosa had a job as a seamstress at a local department store. Her day had just ended, and she had rushed to catch the city bus that would take her home. As Rosa boarded the bus, she could see that it was already quite full. Because the section at the back of the bus where African Americans usually sat was so full, Rosa found a seat near the middle of the bus. Rosa sitting on the bus. The seat Rosa found was just behind the seats reserved for white people. Before long, all the seats on the bus were full and several white people were left standing. Back then, the bus driver had the authority or power to move people, and African Americans were the first to be moved. I'd like you to take a look at the picture now, and if you can see Rosa Parks on the bus, go ahead and stick your thumbs up. Great. The bus driver noticed the people standing and ordered several African American people on the bus to give up their seats. All of them did as he asked, except for Rosa. When the bus driver told Rosa that if she did not stand up, he would call the police to come and arrest her, she quietly responded, "You may do that." When he asked her one more time to stand up, Rosa responded by saying, "I don't think I should have to stand up." I want you to think to yourself, why do you think Rosa refused to stand up? This is Rosa being fingerprinted. The bus driver made the call, and before long, a police officer arrived. The officer wanted to know why she would not give up her seat. Rosa responded by asking the officer a question. "Why are you always pushing us around?" she asked. Rosa was arrested and taken to the police headquarters. Later that night, she was released on bail. Bail means that somebody has to pay money to let her out of jail until she has a trial or hearing. The law at that time in Alabama gave bus drivers the right to assign seats. The word assign means to give or to pick the seat for the other person. And it also gave them the right to carry guns. As a result, many American people felt threatened and were frightened to challenge this practice, but Rosa had done so. What does it mean to challenge something? Rosa later said that she had not planned to protest, but in that moment, her desire for civil rights and her sense of injustice drove her to make that decision. I just read one of our vocabulary words, injustice. Injustice means a lack of fairness. When I made that decision, Rosa said, I knew that I had the strength of my ancestors with me. This was the moment that changed history. Rosa had refused to move, and now others would show their support for her. Crowds of people walked to work. It was decided that the hundreds of African Americans who rode the city buses to work would walk instead. This kind of action is called a boycott. Boycott is another one of our vocabulary words. And that is when a group of people join together and refuse to do business with a company or an organization. In Montgomery, people refused to ride the city buses because they wanted to hurt the business. The NAACP began to organize what became known as the Montgomery Bus Boycott. African American women's groups began to organize too. Rosa and Martin Luther King Jr. A young man named Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led the boycott. Dr. King said, "We will walk until justice runs down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream." Beginning on December 5th, 1955, people refused to ride the city buses in Montgomery. The boycott lasted for 382 days, almost a year. Without passengers to ride the buses couldn't afford to run. At that time in Montgomery, more than 7 out of every 10 riders on buses were African American. Businesses were disrupted. Disrupted is one of our other vocabulary words. When something is disrupted, it means that certain things are prevented from happening due to the possible confusion that is created. Many white people supported the boycott too. On November 13th, 1956, the United States Supreme Court decided that Montgomery's segregated bus seating was unconstitutional. What does it mean to be unconstitutional? That means it was against the law. A court order was served on December 20th, 1956, and the boycott ended the next day. After that, buses were integrated and African American people could sit wherever they wanted. That boycott became a powerful way for people to peacefully protest. When people protest peacefully, they don't use violence. Here we have a map with Michigan and Alabama highlighted. Rosa Parks' actions helped to start the civil rights movement. What is the civil rights movement? In fact, Rosa became known as the mother of the civil rights movement. Rosa remained an active member of the NAACP and other civil rights groups. She showed her support for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. by participating in civil rights marches. Rosa became a member of the staff of a Michigan congressman. She worked in his office for 23 years, from 1965 until she retired in 1988. Rosa also founded an institution, or a place of learning, to help young people complete their education. Rosa receiving the Medal of Freedom. In her lifetime, Rosa received several awards for her courage and her work. In 1979, the NAACP awarded Rosa its Spring Arm Medal. Rosa also received 2 of the U.S. government's most important civilian honors, or those honors given to people who aren't serving in our military. Rosa received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1996 and the Congressional Medal of Honor in 1999. Rosa once said, "I'd see the bus pass every day, but to me, that was a way of life. We had no choice but to accept what was the custom. The bus was among the first ways I realized there was a black world and a white world." Incredibly, by her own actions, Rosa Parks changed that world. Rosa became a symbol of the power of nonviolence. Do we remember what the word nonviolence means? Her quiet, courageous act changed America and changed the course of history.